Hello and welcome back to Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Every week we're bringing you the latest news on Diddy and his upcoming trial. Shaun Diddy Combs is charged with sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution and racketeering with conspiracy known as RICO. He denies all the charges. This week, Diddy's team want the Cassie video discounted, Kanye or Ye shows his support, and the Jay-Z Buzbee case takes a confusing turn. Joining me is Rolling Stone's senior investigative reporter, Cheyenne Roundtree. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi.
And our resident criminal defense attorney, Shaun Kent. Hi, Shaun.
Hey guys, how are y'all doing?
So, Friday the 14th of March, we had the arraignment with Diddy in court being officially charged with the latest superseding indictment. In the first superseder, remember, we had 2 new victims added. In the second one, we had the expansion of his RICO charge to include forced labour, abuse of his employees, and forcing one employee to engage in sex acts with him. Cheyenne, we heard from our New York BBC correspondent Neda last week that Diddy looked grey, but he'd put on a little bit of weight and he was in high spirits. What did you take from his appearance?
I think there was like a collective, almost silent, like, when he walked in, because he has a beard now, his hair's grown out, and he's fully gray. But he did seem to be in relatively good spirits. He hugged his attorneys. He spoke the most he's ever done at court, answering the questions to plead not guilty to the newest kind of accusations in the 2 new superseding indictments. But by all accounts, he seemed to be okay. But I think his appearance was just, the most shocking element of all. I mean, he's been locked away since September. It just shows like he actually has been detained for quite some time now, and it's actually taking a physical toll in terms of just like his appearance.
Especially in the MDC, which we know is a notoriously difficult jail to stay locked up in. Shaun,
Definitely.
Before they go to trial, are they allowed to change their appearance, like get a haircut, get a new suit?
Absolutely. One of the things that we do before any trial is, and now we just do, it's almost a local rule. You don't want the jury to know that your client has been incarcerated. So we don't parade the person outside in their orange jumpsuit. So we get them haircuts, we get them suits. I feel comfortable that Diddy will have a haircut, will be very black haired, shall we say. He'll have a stylist. He'll look the way that he normally looks, or they might be their strategy that they want him to look haggard and he's been beat down. Who knows? But yeah, he's entitled to a haircut and look sharp before trial.
And he obviously came in and he pled not guilty to the second superseding indictment. He didn't need it read out. It wasn't a surprise that he pled not guilty. But one thing that did come up that people might not have expected was this back and forth about the inclusion of the video, the one where we see him assaulting his former romantic partner, Cassie Ventura, in the hallway of a hotel in 2016. The prosecution are saying that they believe CNN has sort of doctored or edited the footage, and it's not the full version that shows the events in their truest form. Either way, it shows an assault, right? Whether they've doctored it or not, they didn't edit it. They're not saying it's AI and they edited his foot into her stomach. Either way, it shows him attacking her.
Yeah, and that's what Diddy's team is claiming. They're claiming that this isn't the best evidence of what actually ended up happening. So if you're in the middle of a trial, you always want the best evidence. You don't want something that has been doctored, has been edited, because you can't get the full presentation. And so maybe Diddy's team is saying, maybe there's something that happened at the beginning that showed this. Maybe there's something at the end. Maybe there's something that's missing. And they're asking for it to be kept out. Realistically, the problem is the best evidence as to what happened is Cassie. So Cassie will be able to get on the stand and say, this is the video. This is what happened. There's nothing missing. This shows everything. So I understand the argument, but when there's a person who actually can testify and say, that's what happened, this video's coming in.
CNN also have said they never altered the video and did not destroy the original copy of the footage, which was retained by the source. They aired the story about the video several months before Combs was arrested, they say. So would their testimony count as well?
Completely. I don't think it's necessary, and I think it's going down a rabbit hole that's not there, because if Diddy's team spends that whole time focusing on this isn't the correct video and there's things edited, that jury's going to be like, why are they trying to hide from the video? The video is what the video is. And don't forget, Cassie can always testify. So whether CNN doctored it, edited, did whatever, Cassie can say it happened. Now, maybe their defense is Cassie's exaggerating and CNN edited it. And I think they're doing what lawyers do and what we all do is they're throwing every motion they can think of to make sure they can protect their client as much as possible.
But the thing that's confusing is it's not really relating to one of the three main charges. I mean, him and Cassie settled outside of court a day after she raised her civil lawsuit. So why are the prosecution so keen to keep the video as part of the evidence?
Well, their theory, it has a tie into the evidence, and their theory has got to be that that video is related to the sex trafficking charge somehow, that was a portion and part, and Cheyenne can probably talk about it more, but that video is directly related. That was one of the freak-off parties or something of that nature, or that shows the pattern of abuse that made her feel as though she had to participate in these sex-off. It has the tie into the underlying charge. Generally, you cannot just bring in somebody's prior bad acts, bad conduct to try to show that they're a bad person. And so some people could be arguing, oh, they're just bringing this Diddy video to show he's a bad person. Normally, you can't do that. It's called 404B evidence. And what that is, as I mentioned, normally in trial, you cannot bring in somebody's prior bad acts, meaning prior dumb stuff that they have done to make somebody convict them. Easiest way to think about it. If I have a client currently on trial for drug trafficking, they've sold crack, cocaine, marijuana, and let's say they've done it 7 times in the past. Well, if you're sitting on the jury and the prosecutor is able to say, well, he sold drugs 6 times in the past, stands the reason he probably did it again, the jury's more likely to be like, yeah, he's been doing this a long time. I think he did it this time. So the courts have said, normally, make sure you understand, state courts say normally you can't get into those prior bad acts at all, unless you have a reason to show that you're not trying to show somebody's bad character. And that's what 404B evidence. So if a prosecutor can say, we're not trying to show that Diddy's a bad person, we're trying to show motive, intent, that this wasn't an accident, absence of mistake, those are the reasons. So they say, prosecutors, give us a reason, a good reason, other than you're trying to show that he's a bad person for this to come in. This is why everybody says the strength of the federal system is scary. What I've just described to you was the state law system. You probably have heard them talking about another rule called 413, and I want to make sure I read this. But Rule 413 in the federal system, and remember I told you, normally you cannot get in someone's prior bad acts. 413, similar crimes and sexual assault cases. In a criminal case in which a defendant is accused of sexual assault, the court may admit evidence that the defendant committed another sexual assault. The evidence may be considered on any matter of which it is relevant. So if the prosecutors, maybe some of the, and we don't know because they haven't told us, but maybe some of this 404B evidence, and we know there's been allegations, are other sexual assaults that Diddy has committed. And even though that would be prior bad acts normally in the federal system, that can come in.
We've now heard, obviously, the prosecution say that it's going to take 6 weeks to present their side of the argument. So I'm assuming some of it is going to be almost not world building, but I don't know how to describe it in another way. But yeah, taking you into sort of character building of who he is. And we've spoken about corroboration in full conduct before. Is that kind of like a similar thing with this video? Here he's doing this. We've accused him of other things. Here's literal physical evidence of him doing the same thing.
The great prosecutors in the United States will build their case slowly, painfully, brick by brick. They will not rush. This 6 weeks is not going to be some jaw-dropping, shocking evidence. It's going to be bit by bit by bit by bit. It's like the death of 1,000 cuts. And so what they'll do is they'll talk about his past. They'll talk about his history. The Cassie video will not be all of the evidence. It'll just be one brick in the chain. And the reason they do that is if good defense attorneys can take away one brick, there's 1,000 other bricks they got to fight with. And so that's why it's going to take so long, even though they have all the charges.
And we have a clearer idea of when that's going to start now. They're saying 5th of May for jury selection, 12th of May for opening statements, and we will be with you, bringing you updates on the case as it happens. Now it's time for Elsewhere in the Diddyverse, and it is an ever-expanding universe because now Kanye, or rather the artist formerly known as Kanye, who now goes by Ye, has made his presence known. This is not the first time he's tweeted out support of Diddy. He did so back in February. That was also accompanied by a slew of anti-Semitic tweets. Now he seems to have collaborated with Diddy and his son, Christian Combs, or King Combs, who himself is facing a civil lawsuit for sexual assault. They're collaborating on a new song. The caption on the X tweet that he put out reads, "Lonely roads still go to sunshine, new song by Puff Daddy featuring his son, King Combs, my daughter, Northwest, and new Yeezy artist from Chicago, Jasmine Williams." The song includes Diddy seemingly on a phone call with Ye from jail. We've asked Diddy's team about this phone audio to check if it really is him. They haven't got back to us yet, but some showbiz news sites are quoting anonymous insiders who say that it is him and he didn't know he was being recorded. We'll keep an eye on whatever else Kanye or Ye chooses to put out about his support of the rapper. Now, we really need to talk about this Jay-Z and Buzbee defamation case that seems to be changing day by day. Everything I then hear something that contradicts it. Cheyenne, could you just bring us up to speed on what's happened recently?
Yeah, so the last time I think we left off on this was that Jane Doe had voluntarily dismissed her civil lawsuit against Jay-Z and Diddy. And I feel like sometimes we forget that Diddy was also part of this case, but really Jay-Z has kind of been the more dominant force in terms of fighting this case. So the case went away. It was dismissed with prejudice, which means she cannot bring it back again. But Jay-Z is still fighting with Tony Buzbee in California, and he also now has found the Jane Doe and has sued her in her home state of Alabama, and along with Tony Buzbee. And Jay-Z, he said he came into information from two private investigators who showed up at Jane Doe's doorstep, and she basically alleged to have said, yeah, Tony Buzbee pushed me into saying Jay-Z. Jay-Z was not part of this alleged sexual assault. You know, it was really Tony Buzbee that put me up to it. So Jay-Z took that, declaration that he got from the investigators, he took it to court and he said, look, like this is what I've been trying to fight all along, that this was completely made up. Tony Buzbee says, no, my client didn't say that. She said that these investigators showed up at my front porch and harassed her. I never said anything about you putting me up to it or anything. So this whole kind of thing spiraled a little bit out of control a little bit. However, we're at this kind of impasse where investigators are saying, well, she said this, that she denied Jay-Z was ever a part of this alleged sexual assault. And Tony Buzbee says, no, I stand by my client.
And of course, this is playing out in the court of public opinion. Tony Buzbee very famously now in October of last year came out and said, call this 1-800 number if you have information or you have been a victim of sexual assault by P. Diddy. And he did a press conference and he told the BBC that he's bringing, he thinks he has 150 cases that he can take to court. With this that's playing out with Jay-Z, we're also hearing things released in the press. ABC News got hold of the recording that the investigators have of the woman who accused Jay-Z and Diddy. So that's all playing out on social media as well, and people are extremely confused. Buzbee says that he wants this evidence that Jay-Z has now submitted removed because it quote, advances a factual narrative that is demonstrably and indisputably false and lacks probative value. Shaun, what does that mean, probative value?
In the law, we have this little thing we call prejudice versus probative. And so probative means it actually adds and helps the trier of fact, the jury, get information. Prejudice means it's just prejudicial. It doesn't help at all. It 100% has probative value.
But then, he says she felt intimidated and they turned up at her doorstep and she was almost scared into saying that. It also goes on in a filing that Buzbee made, saying that on February 4th, 2025, after discussions between Carter's attorney at Quinn Emanuel in New York and the Buzbee's party's New York counsel, an agreement was reached confirming certain terms, which included the dismissal of the New York action, a commitment by Carter and his attorneys that they will not authorize, employ, or otherwise engage investigators or anyone else to harass or otherwise interact with my client, his law firm, or his present and former clients, employees, and family. They say the premise was a mutual understanding that all parties would walk away from their respective litigations. So that's saying that kind of like mediation, which is what they were asking for in the first place, and they came together and they agreed that she'd drop it with prejudice and then Jay-Z would drop his case and go their separate ways?
Yeah. I mean, that's what that is basically saying. But the question is, it's very strange to say, we will drop this lawsuit if you don't agree to go forward. The question is why? What are we getting out of it? And I think that's what we're missing. Usually you say, I'll do something if you give me something. I'm not seeing what the victim would have gotten out of that. So that's the weird issue on this, because they're not saying that small part. So it's just like, why did they enter into this backroom deal that nobody has heard about?
And then it's sort of part of what Busby's saying as well is you, Jay-Z, have employed these investigators to go to her house, and this is a violation of the agreement we came to. But it could be anyone.
It could be anybody on the planet, and it's going to be incumbent upon Busbee to prove that it's somebody who is acting at the discretion of JB and the control of Jay-Z. It can't just be some random investigators who said, you know what, let's go talk to her. We know who she is, and now that we've gotten it, now we'll call Jay-Z and give the information. You just don't know.
And there's been a further response from Jay-Z's side to Buzbee, and it says, quote, defendants have burdened the record with more than 100 pages of this material. They hope to either distract from what is genuinely at issue or justify their pathetic non-investigation of their client's claims, their reckless disregard of obvious facts that raise red flags about her mind-boggling assertion. And on Monday, a summons. So he's filed a defamation case against Buzbee, but he's also filed a case against the Jane Doe. And on Monday, a summons in civil action was delivered to Tony Buzbee from Jay-Z or Shaun Carter with a demand for a jury trial in Alabama. Shaun, what does that mean?
Well, they want Alabama because that is where the Jane Doe lives. And so that's where they had to file the lawsuit there. What's weird about that, if you read originally when Spiro and they guys were talking about it, they are very sympathetic to the Jane Doe. They are very much saying that we don't want anything out of the Jane Doe. It is assumption that Jane Doe doesn't have $10, $15, $20 million to pay them. So the question is, why have we named her as a party? They want Buzbee. And so that's why they're filing in Alabama.
And when they demand for a jury trial, wouldn't all trials have a jury?
Every lawyer, every case, you have a right to try a case just in front of a judge, a single person. Right? Juries in the United States can be 6 or 12. It'd be 12 in this situation. But sometimes if there's not an issue of fact, meaning it's just a legal analysis, you don't need a jury. You just go to a judge and say, Judge, we disagree about the law, so I just want you by yourself to decide it. So you can make your decision if you want a jury trial, if you want what's called a bench trial, because the judge sits on a bench. And so we say, we just want you to decide on your own. But they don't want a judge to decide this. They want court of public opinion. They want 12 people to make a decision.
And the next hearing in that case is next week, so we'll keep you updated on that. Now, we've got to do this fact or fiction. This was a weird moment. That's us on the pod talking about freak-off tapes being shown in court. It's from a previous episode of this podcast. Now, this has been cut and pasted with a clip of a then 19-year-old Demi Moore kissing her then 15-year-old co-star, which people in the comments have labelled disturbing, and clips from News Nation talking about Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore being subpoenaed for the Diddy trial. We contacted Demi Moore and Philip Tanzini, who were in that video together, for statements, and they did not respond. But the headline on the piece reads, shocking reports from court, Ashton Kutcher found guilty in Diddy case. Ashton Kutcher breaks down. This now has 538,000 views and lots of comments from concerned and some scared members of the public. Firstly, me and Shaun weren't talking about Ashton Kutcher. I don't think we've actually ever mentioned Ashton Kutcher on this podcast before. Shaun, correct me here, but Kutcher and Moore being subpoenaed isn't an indication of wrongdoing in any way. And we don't know what side they might have been subpoenaed for.
None in the slightest. But what's interesting about this is it goes to the argument that Diddy's team is making about be careful with videos in 2025. You don't know how things are being spliced, edited, and so forth. You and I had no conversation whatsoever. I don't even like that 70s show. I don't know if I've ever talked about Ashton Kutcher in my life. But that's added and it making it look like the two of us are making comments on that and adding credence to something like that. And that's what makes things scary.
Yeah. And firstly, Kutcher can't be found guilty because he was never charged with anything. The video with Demi Moore concerned and shocked a lot of people. And then the News Nation clips appear to explain sort of the connection with Kutcher, but the music it's layered over is really dramatic. Even the font in the video is newspaper clipping. So it has the aesthetic of a hostage letter. And we have an algorithm that is designed for you to scroll every 3 seconds, that these videos are created and curated to elicit an emotional response from you and leave you with just enough questions to drive you back to the original page where it was posted to watch the rest of their videos. When you're scrolling, think about what music is being played underneath. Think about what fonts they're using. Think about what they even put a filter. I don't know if you noticed, but they actually edited us to look better, which I found kind of
good. I was like, damn, you guys go. All right.
I was like, You've smoothed out my skin. Like,
Your old
thanks.
man, they made me look smooth as hell. I'm like, I'm aging backward. There's some Benjamin Button going on here. I'll take it.
But I was like, wow, somebody's really put a lot of time, effort, and energy into making this as shocking and as worrying and as concerning as possible, whilst peddling complete disinformation. But that's it for Fact or Fiction this week. And I just want to say thank you again, both of you, so much for joining me this week. Thank you, Cheyenne.
Thank you.
And thank you, Shaun.
Thank you so much. I'm off to trial.
That's it for this episode of Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. If you'd like to send us a question, you can get us on WhatsApp at +44 330 123 551. That's +44 330 123 551.